NineTen, NineTen, NineTen in the morning.
Yay. Hey, viewers of the NineTen podcast, whether you're a NineTen student, a NineTen leader, or maybe somebody who just stumbled upon this podcast and is checking it out. For the month of June, we're tackling some topics that fall under the category of mental health. So some anxiety stuff, some depression, suicidal ideation, and kind of tackling our cultural moment right now where so many of us are wrestling with this and struggling with it. And so interviewing a couple counselors, a couple people that have walked through this personally. I shared a little bit of my story in this month's podcast. And so I just wanted to give you a heads up before you dive into this, before you watch it or listen to it on Spotify, that these are some of the things that we're talking about. And so if this is a triggering topic for you, or this is while you're listening, you're wrestling with something, please don't wrestle alone. We would love to talk to you. Reach out to us here in NineTen or at North Coast Church. We'd love to put you in touch with the right people. So thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Check out this episode. Yo, what's up, NineTen? Welcome to the NineTen podcast. Got Mr. Chris Geddis here today, and this is going to be a treat because, honestly, I have so much of NineTen exists because of you, and you did NineTen for 10 years? 8 years?
8 years.
8 years?
8 years, yeah.
Which is a lot, right? I think too often we don't understand the shoulders that we stand on in life in general, right? Like you think about like America, and how often do I think about, the forefathers risking everything to come over and build a nation, or like California and everything. We would just go like, we built this. It's like, no, you didn't. And I think that's obviously on like a huge scale, but on a much smaller scale, I just think about North Coast and Larry and all he did to forge and move us forward in the Vista campus, and then you zoom that into NineTen specifically, and 8 years is a long time to run in youth ministry. And it's funny because at North Coast you go like 8 years and you're like, oh well, that's nothing compared to Travis. And then you look at he's screwed us all over.
He really has. I mean, the bar is just set too high.
Yeah, he's like, 8 years, that's cute, right? I tripled that. But the national average for a youth pastor is what, like 18 months right now, I think?
It's something low, insane like that.
That's gnarly.
Yeah.
18 months. 8 years in NineTen. Were you a part of the split, the original high school split?
Yeah.
Dude, talk to me about those days.
Yeah, man. So I did eight years in NineTen, but I did almost 10, 11 years just in high school. And then I did a couple years of college ministry. So, yeah, I was there at the very beginning when... And I think that a lot of people know this. Maybe they don't. But, I mean, it was really like an idea that Chris Brown had. And Chris Brown, I remember being in, we called it the Tiki Room. And that was the meeting room back at the old campus off Melrose. And we're sitting there. And it's the Tiki Room because they had this ridiculous, just gaudy, decor of tiki in the room. And so,
why are so many youth rooms themed tiki?
I don't know.
Like my church, Atascadero Bible Church, my junior high room, super tiki, like grass skirt roof, and like tiki torches and like old surfboards everywhere. It was like, oh, I guess.
I never got it, but no other ministry, designed like that. It was specific to that room, the tiki room. And so I remember we had this big old whiteboard, and Brown just in classic Brown just starts vomiting, all of these different ideas and scenarios of where high school could go. Yeah. Because the challenge at that time was the fact that it was difficult to have a ministry that was healthy for your 9th grade and 10th grader who is trying to figure out who they are, their identity. Yeah. They're awkward. They're unsure of themselves. There's no confidence. They're trying out different things. And then you have a senior who's like, I'm ready to, get out of here. And they're thinking about, college and where they're going to go. And so it never made sense to have all 4 grades in the same ministry.
What do you aim at?
Hard. Yeah, it was hard to do it well. And so what started as was, hey, let's get a pastor for every grade. Still going to be one ministry, but we're going to have one pastor assigned to that grade. They're responsible for events and, leaders and volunteers. And, we did that for about a year, and, it was okay, mixed results. But for the amount of...
That would be like the JH78 model for high school. You almost have like a director, pastor over each grade. I guess they do grade and gender, which is a little more specific focused.
Right.
But that was kind of the genesis. That was, okay, let's start by trying to take care of each group individually.
Right.
Okay.
And then Brown goes, hey, what if?
Right. The classic words.
What if? And so then it was, hey, why don't we try 9, 10, 11, 12? That makes more sense. Those two grades, and we'll focus our energy and time. And so it really was like really an experiment. Like it wasn't like a something that was like a final finished product. It was like we talked about it at the end of spring. Okay,
2008, right?
Yeah, so end of spring. So we're talking about this in like April, May, when we're gearing up to end that school year and then go into summer. And it's like, all right, let's do it this summer. Like 9, 10 is going to have a camp, 11, 12 is going to have a camp, and we'll see how it goes. And it was like, oh, okay, let's do it.
Yeah.
So I jumped in with Mike Hodson and
the man, the myth.
Yeah, that guy.
He's a Raiders fan, close to my heart.
He is a Raiders fan. I respect that. I respect that. So my brother-in-laws, actually both my brother-in-laws are Raider fans.
Hey, there we go. Come
on. Yeah, man, him and I, whew. He was the perfect partner because he knew me well, and he was the antagonist, and so he always knew how to like push me just enough where I would do something that he'd want to see happen in ministry. So he never got his hands dirty.
Yeah.
He was always like scheming of like, oh, it'd be really funny. It'd be really funny if, Geddis scared, the heck out of this person. And then he would plant these seeds enough where I go, I should do this and scare her because she's so fearful of spiders. And so
let me chase that for a second though, because I've heard legends of you were a big scare guy.
I loved to prank. Okay. But as I've gotten older, there are, just certain lines I won't cross anymore.
Yeah.
I have some guidelines now, some boundaries. Whereas before, when I first got into ministry, student ministries then,
you didn't know what a boundary was back then.
No, student ministries then in 2008 versus now in 22 could not be any more different. In contrast, like some of the things that we did, people would get fired for, I think,
for sure
today.
And then you fast forward or rewind, I should say, to like 98. Like it feels like 98 to 2008 to 2018 are just like three different realms. Like my dad was a youth pastor up in Lake Arrowhead from 92 to 99. So it was like this 7-year run. And I look at some of the stuff he did and I'm like, wait, what? You did what? And went where? Like he used to do a trip every spring break to Lake Havasu. And I'm like, bro, you went to like Party Central.
And tell me how that's going to build your faith.
I mean, still, like they would get like their own island and they'd be like up the river and everything. But I'm still like, I'm trying to imagine pitching to parents now. Like, it'll be great.
I could. That's
the 90s,
wild. Yeah,
though. It was different.
Yes, and you're right. There was 3 different like seasons of ministry that they don't look anything alike. And so to clarify what I mean by you get fired now, it's like everybody was okay. It was just kind of like you laughed off what you heard. Oh, the youth ministry did this, kind of thing. But people for the most part were like accepting, and if anything, they were, promoting, some of the behavior in youth ministry at the time. And that was just across the board, I think, in the United States. It's just youth ministry was how wild. It's kind of funny. It really goes back to, I think, of one of the shows that really inspired a lot of my pranking back in the day was Fear Factor. And Fear Factor plays a huge part in some of the pranks that I did. It was just always like, how far in terms of gross and disgusting can you get? And kids ate it up. Literally. Like I remember I did a freshman transition event. And so it was on a Tuesday night, and so I come in with my staff, and we're doing a Fear Factor themed night, and we're hanging out. We have all these different, activities, and I can connect it loosely to what the message was going to be later on that night. But we have things like this
loosely.
We have this thing. I'm just being honest. I mean, it was more about like, how can I pull this off than anything else? And that's, I think, the switch that started happening of like, okay, we need to make sure that we're focused on, hey, what's the goal and the message? Does this fit into how we are shaping these Christians? And
you're like, look, kids, the beginning of wisdom is the fear of the Lord. Let's pray.
Not that shallow, but and so we would build, like, I had this kiddie pool of just the most ridiculous things. Let me tell you this: we never did that specific event again. Okay, so we had this kiddie pool, and I filled it up with lima beans. Okay, white lima beans, just it's overflowing. So I mean, imagine it's just the texture, gushy, just not nice. And so and then I did that so the contrast would be sharp, because then I got pig parts, and I got the hoof, and I got the tail, and I got the snout, and I got the tongue, and all these, and we cooked them. We cooked them, boiled them thoroughly, and then threw them in this kiddie pool with lima beans. And the lima beans was deep. It was at least, I want to say it was at least like 2-3 inches of lima beans. But I'm saying the amount of lima, I mean, we're just walking out with shopping carts of like Costco size cans of lima beans. People are looking at us like, what are you doing?
I love the expense report that month.
And and we fill this thing up, we throw them in there, and they're just instantly hidden. But I go, you know what? Let's amp this up, because it's fear factor. So I decide to put, because you can't have blood inside the kiddie pool. I mean, just obviously for health reasons.
It's nice to know you drew the line somewhere.
Yeah, I didn't want to get anybody sick, so I get food coloring, red food coloring, and put it all in there and mix it up. So it just looks like this disgusting bath of pig parts. And I remember Brown coming in, and he's watching the night, and his face.
What did they have to do?
They had to dive. It was like bobbing for apples.
Hands behind your back?
Yes. Bob for pig parts. And so it was different points. But again, this was the season where kids were like, yeah, like literally losing their minds that they got to do this stuff. So it was never like this hard sell. It was never like, hey guys, like, so we have this stuff and we're hoping you're doing this. Like, they would walk in and go, oh my gosh, like this playground almost made for them. And so I remember Chris Brown coming in, and I remember his face, and it was just this face of disappointment, like, are you serious right now? Did you really think of, is this happening right now? And the following conversations, and just like, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think of it from a parent perspective. And that was a lot of like the growing up that I did, during youth ministry was, thinking of, okay, I got to be on the flip side and think about the parent. Didn't have kids at that point. So that really wasn't, something that I processed through as I was thinking through events. The other one in that same night was, so there's always a lot of bugs on Fear Factor. Always. And so I was like, you know what? What if we had, for the finale, like the kids, and we give prizes, gift cards and stuff like that. Like back then, iTunes is huge. So it's like gift card to iTunes.
I was going to say that, like, I feel like a big part of the reason youth ministry was that way was you were competing with entertainment. Like, church had to be entertaining or just as entertaining. Whereas now I feel like we've kind of just given up. Like, at least that's my mentality a little bit, is like, I'm not going to compete with entertainment. Like, if you want entertainment in San Diego, are you kidding me? Like, you got freaking movies like Top Gun in IMAX experience that were filmed in like jets. So it's like, well, I'm never going to produce a content that's that good. You got like endless amounts of music at the tips of your fingers in like Apple Music and Spotify and things like that. You got the beach. You got like... So entertainment-wise, I feel like the church has just kind of like thrown in the towel a little bit and gone, we're not going to be as entertaining as the world, but what we can do is we can offer something that no one else can offer in like authentic community and just this genuineness that can exist at church. But in some ways, like, we've lost a little bit of that. Like my dad tells stories from the 90s of youth ministry, or like Chris Brown will tell stories about like going down to Mexico and like melting some kid's hands off with a firework, right? So the same Chris Brown that was sitting with a disappointed look at you was kind of probably looking in the mirror a little bit. Going,
maybe.
This was me.
Maybe. And you're right. That was, and even if you look at NineTen, those first 8 years, that gradual change was happening.
Yeah.
And it was this metamorphosis from this ministry of extreme. It really was. It was just a ministry built on how extreme can we be? How much, entertainment can we pack in? How can we make this so exciting that people are like, I've got to be there. I can't miss it. I've got to bring my friends. And it really did start to change and become more about an experience, and more about that community piece that you talked about. How can we, like house parties? I see that you guys are still doing that now. That was something that was birthed during that time.
Totally.
Of like, okay, we can't compete with the world because all of a sudden technology just started taking off.
100%.
And now you're like, okay, well, I can't compete with that level or that quality anymore. YouTube is taking off. All these different things are just blowing up. And you're like, okay, well, now this is, or, it's not relevant anymore. Fear factor is not relevant.
Yeah.
It lived a long life, but it should have been put to pasture a long time before it faded out.
Yeah.
So real quick, that last story was just, I had a kid, and Andrew, I won't say the last name, still around, but Andrew comes up, and I remember,
I just play.
And the finale was, hey, who is willing to allow me to put something on their tongue and without sight unseen, blindfolded, and eat it? And so it was Andrew that stepped forward, and I'd gone to a local reptile store, and and they also sold Madagascar hissing cockroaches. And so I picked up a couple of those bad boys, and I only used one for this one, but the others actually got out, and and so for the
they
rest
made
of
it, and
for,
there's still an infestation at North Coast Church.
For years at the Melrose campus, you would hear like those things and crickets, because we used a bunch of crickets and stuff too. We poured crickets on people from above. We built like this. Yeah, we did ridiculous things that I'm like, if my kid went and did that, I would be mortified.
Yeah,
mortified. So, blindfolded, tongue out. It hits his tongue, and he instantly just starts shivers. So you can physically see the shivers and chills go down through his body, but he eats it like a champ. I mean, he bites down. It was like slow motion. Bites down on it right in the middle. You see its head, and then he's chewing, and there's bits. And I'm hoping these videos just die. Like they never come back up again.
The antennas are like sticking.
Yeah,
out his
but
mouth.
he literally has like Madagascar hissing cockroaches like stuck in his teeth after he's done. And I'm just like, oh my gosh. I remember saying like, this is the best night of my life. Like this is what I get to do for a living. But that, like I said, that changed. But yeah, so the type of pranks now that I do is different, but I still at heart, I'm still a prankster.
Okay. Do you scare your kids?
Yes.
It's fun.
It is.
It's fun.
I have a line though with my wife. We made that agreement a long time ago.
Fair.
I
kind of am in the same way. I like scaring Piper. It's like very gentle because she's like 2.
Yes.
But with my wife, I can't do it. She is like a big screamer. Like if you walk past her office and she's not paying attention, she'll scream. Like just because you walked in the hallway. Or like I'll be at home and I'll like walk in the garage door and she will like scream up here and I'm like, hello, Austin, husband, yeah. I live here. So I can't scream her or I can't scare her, or else it goes next level a little too quickly. But yeah, Chris, you exited NineTen. Our crossing of paths was extremely brief. I don't even know if you remember me. Probably not, honestly, because I was kind of a fly in the wall. But I was at your like exit lunch when you when you stepped away from NineTen, and I'll never forget you stood up in front of everybody, and it was kind of this. It was like a turning point in your life of looking at some mental health stuff and going like, hey, don't get to where I am. Like, yeah. I remember you saying that. You stood up on stage and just went like, there's people like, Chris Brown in this community that will be there for you, but you had kind of pigeonholed yourself a little bit or gone into yourself a little bit going like, I can just make it through. I can muscle this. So I can make it happen. Talk to me a little bit about that from your perspective of looking back now, and obviously a much healthier season now, yeah. Like back on staff, back with this community after stepping away for 4 years.
Yeah, 4.5.
4.5 years. Yeah, what was that transition out like? What do you look back on now and see and have learned that you would almost pass on as that, hey, here's some wisdom having walked through that?
I think you really hit, I think the heart of it, which was what I went through and what I experienced. I would never want anybody to have to walk. Like, for you to get to a point where you have, arguably, I'm like, this is the job of my lifetime. Like, this is what I felt called into ministry. I saw God open up just insane doors that I'm like, that never would have happened outside of him to get me into ministry. I'm doing full-time ministry. This is my dream. I got to build a ministry from scratch, essentially, and lead that ministry as a lead pastor for probably the last, 4 or 5 years that I was there. And so I got to build my team. I got to build, the building. We were part of like selecting the building, like everything that, NineTen was, I had this opportunity to have a hand in, and yet I had to walk away from it. Like, that was my passion. That was my calling. That was a source of joy. That was coming to work and feeling like I wasn't working. Like, I was blessed to be on this phenomenal team and build a volunteer staff and to do the events that collectively that we were like excited about. And it wasn't, what I loved about what NineTen was when I left was that it wasn't like my show. It was really this staff and team where I really was about platforming and saying, hey, I want to include everybody. What do you think? What do you want to do? And I helped to guide it. But for the most part, it was this team coming together to say, this is where we see NineTen. And it was creative, and it was fun, and it was spontaneous. And it just was such an incredible time in my life. And I had to walk away from that because I wasn't a good steward in my own life when it came to my health. And I ignored, signs of depression and anxiety for so long that it started to manifest itself as panic attacks. And that was my body's like kind of last ditch effort of getting my attention and saying, hey, there's something wrong and you need to stop and you need to actually investigate. I'm a big like type A, like doer, like get things done, like plan. And, I'd have, like I'm looking at your office right now and I'm jealous because I'm like, man, if I had a whiteboard like this area where I could just kind of get out notes. I mean, I had maybe half of one and it was always full. And, and I loved thinking about the future and thinking about, okay, what's next year going to be like? Hey, how do we improve? What does this look like to, better serve our students? And so, for me, it was a huge blow to stop and go, okay, I need to apply that to myself. Look at how am I doing? What are the details? What is next year going to look like? Am I spending time with my kids? Because at that point I had, 2 kids under 5, and I was probably more of a father, unfortunately, to some of my, high school students than I was at times to my own kids. And that was more out of like, I loved what I was doing and I wanted to be there and I wanted to be at every event and I wanted to be a part of students' lives. And I did the student leadership, program, and I added the extra nights to my schedule, but I never took, stock or inventory of how I was doing. I was very good at like, hey, how are you doing and what's going on? And I had all these meetings and check-ins set with all of my staff to make sure that I never got them to a place where they were burnt. Or done, or we missed something, but yet I didn't have that set in my own life. So I was constantly pouring out, but I had no checks or balances. And so panic attack happens, and the first time I'm driving and I'm able to pull over in a parking lot, I'm there for almost 3 hours.
Jeez.
And I remember just like I thought I was dying at one point. I didn't know what was going on. My body's locking up. And I just feel like I am a prisoner in my own body. And my mind is just running rampant about what this could be and what's going on and the feelings. And they're so intense. And I'm just like, my body won't respond. Why? What is going on? And so after that was like the big, obviously, like wake up moment for me. And so I go to, my primary doctor. I go to, I get a psychologist. I get a, therapist. I start getting all these doctors in my life to go, what is going on? And so find out that, yeah, actually I've been, struggling with anxiety. And on top of that, I've probably have had some depressive, episodes and seasons for the last couple of years, going back and looking at, some of the symptoms of depression, and then going and pairing that with some of the seasons in my life where I was like, man, I was so tired. I just went home as soon as I could, after lunch sometimes, and I would just be, a vegetable almost, just very unresponsive and just veg at home. And hours would go by and I'd go, what time is it? Like, it feels like it's been minutes. And so I started getting the help that I needed at that point. But I continued to do ministry. And it was really that question of, okay, can I overcome this while I'm in ministry?
Mm.
And
did you feel like you had to be a different person when you were in the ministry sphere? It was like, I can take care of myself here, but then I got to almost put on this, because you're a big personality. You're a joyful dude. You got a big laugh. And that was like a lot of the magnetism to your team and to NineTen. Like, did you feel like you had to manufacture that when you were with your team, or?
Very, very rarely. And that's because I'm like I really do wear, my emotions. I should say not my emotions. I wear my moods on my sleeve. And so if I was not feeling it that day, it was so hard for me to overcome. It was so hard to throw on the smile or to laugh. And so it was very clear, hey, Geddis is having an off day, or Geddis is off. Unfortunately, kind of became a thing. So it wasn't really me manufacturing, trying to put something on. It was
that
me
makes sense.
Really like in the moment going, dang, what's going on? I don't want to be this person right now. I don't want to be that guy. And so, so I tried to, figure out while I was in ministry, because I didn't want to give up my dream job. I felt called to it. I'm like, God, I don't want to do that. I don't want to walk away from this. I don't want to give this up. But it became clear that I couldn't get health while I was doing ministry. There was no way. The toll that had taken on my, mental and emotional, it just wasn't possible. I really needed to, step away. And so I remember going and making that, decision, talking to my wife, and she was just like, Chris, this is your dream and you're so gifted at it and you're called to it. Like, are you sure? And I'm just like, babe, I can't keep doing the same thing over and over again, expecting that something's going to be different. And I said, I've tried, I've got to step down, and I need to make sure this ministry is run by, someone who can take care of it and give more time and energy than I can, who's healthy. Because, I could have kept going if I didn't care about my, me personally and how I was doing. I could have just, kind of flipped the switch and gone right back to, oh, I love this, and who cares if I'm having panic attacks, and who cares, I'll figure it out. But at that point, I had to really think about my family, and it was really my kids, and I'm just like, and I don't want to live that way anymore.
Yeah, and your body was keeping score,
And my body was keeping score. So even if I tried, I felt like it was bound to shut down at some point. And who knows what it would have been at that point. So I think one thing for sure that, one of the pieces that I would say, that I really learned was just to make sure that you're taking like an inventory, of yourself, and don't expect other people to do that for you. And I think sometimes we expect that someone's going to pick up on, hey, I'm hurting, I'm lost, I don't know what to do, because we either put out subtle things or we say certain phrases, hoping that someone's going to respond. But the reality is, unless you're going to be direct or be better at evaluating and going, am I okay? Like, do I have time to myself? Do I am I being true to myself? Is this, what is taking more energy than it should, and is there anything that's bringing me joy right now? And I wasn't asking those questions. And so that's what I definitely first off would say that would be the wisdom learned through this process is you've got to evaluate. You've got to take time to go, how am I doing? And am I who I'm supposed to be? What the person that God has called me to be? Why or why not? Why or why not? Because I feel that we really at a certain level we know. And that's where we really have to kind of be real with ourselves and go, I'm not being that person, but it's only gonna happen when you can actually find the amount of time that you need. Okay, a lot of students and things that I people that I talked to recently, it's like, yeah, you know what, they do their quiet times or the devos in the car. It's like, or, I'm going to spend time, with God on my break. And I'm like, that is not the amount of time that you need. Like, the amount of time that you need in order to be deeply reflective is going to be more than 15 minutes that you have on a break. And I think people, we think that we can just jump in and jump out. Like, okay, I was at work, I was at this meeting, and now I'm going to go, hey, I got a half an hour. I'm going to really now take some time to decompress. And it's like, no, you need more than that.
Yeah.
You really do. So.
Yeah. Love that wisdom. And just even as we wrap up here, to know how important it is to hit that pause button. Because I agree with you wholeheartedly. Like, I don't think we live like secular lives and then like spiritual lives. I think it is one. And we confuse that. Sometimes we think we can jump into like our spiritual lives, and that challenge to take inventory rather than just to like try to get your 15 minutes to kind of check that box. And then honestly, like, numb. I feel like that's like maybe one of the biggest coping mechanisms of my generation, the next generation, is like with a smartphone, with the prevalence of Netflix and HBO Max and whatever it is. It's like I can throw a show on, I can listen to music, and I can just kind of like turn off and just numb and not care. And it's like, it's scary how long you can numb rather than actually paying attention to the root of why you feel like you need to numb.
Yep.
Which is so big. But thanks for your vulnerability even in sharing that. I know these episodes are a little bit longer, so if you stuck with us to the end, thanks for sticking with us. But so important to have these conversations, taking the month of June and just kind of focusing on mental health and what does it look like to take care. And yeah, thanks for sharing your story there. And I know that vulnerability helps a lot of people. I know listening to these go, dang, yeah, like me too. And knowing that somebody in a position like yours in a pastoral role can go, here's where I struggled big time. Yeah. I love that piece. So thanks, Geddis. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man.
And we'll for sure have you back on here because I didn't even get to the story where you fell through the roof.
So many. Fell through the roof. Jumped through the roof at some point, through all kinds of things. Like,
so many good stories. We'll run it back next time.
So
we'll run it back.
I hit a car into a building before. I mean, there's so much.
Yeah, you broke a garage door, right?
Yeah, I broke a garage door.
So I've heard the stories
Craigslist
in some way, shape, or form.
Yeah, I've done. There's a lot.
We'll run it back.
But hey, real quick, just for anybody that's listening or watching, it's so important. If you are or identify with anything that I said, so important that you talk to somebody. Yeah. Don't allow that to be a conversation you have with yourself. Mm-hmm. But hey, you got to go and talk to somebody. You've got to say, hey, this is where I'm at, and is this okay, or am I off on this? Because you will never get the help you need if you keep that conversation to yourself.
Love it. Thanks, Chris.
Yep.
Thanks, NineTen. Catch you next time.